and while we're waiting on Michael to dial in, I'll just say if you go to the website, I've added 2 new pages, and I'm putting the links to those 2 pages in the notes for today. We've been talking about Robert Sapolsky's That Man Doesn't Have Free Will, and we're going to continue talking about that today. So I created 2 new pages. One of them is just called whygen.org/freewill, and it's where I'm putting the excerpts for all of these shows on that page, so they'll all be in one place. And then there's another page. We had mentioned Stress, Portrait of a Killer multiple times, but we didn't have an actual page. So I've created a page for that and put several links to his videos that we referred to. And most of those were you know, he studied apes for 40 years, I guess, and his visits to Kenya, and one of the unique stories was about this one troop and how the alpha males were the most angry, stressed members of the troop. And when the troop had gotten into some tainted meat, it was the angry, stressed ones who met their demise, and the remaining ones, which were mostly females, very quickly transformed into a peaceful troop. And even new males that would come into the group, it wouldn't take but, you know, a few months for them to realize, hey, my alpha aggressiveness isn't going to work here, and they would become, you know, more peaceful. And so it transformed them. And then he had another documentary. He's got several, but then another one he talks about the high-ranking baboons versus the nice, friendly ones, and that it added to their longevity, and that it was, you know, he actually said they were the perfect model for westernized human stress. That stress is a big killer. And, you know, a lot of times if you check with doctors, one of the biggest complaints today, and so you know, it's like, you know, killing ourselves, cancel that thought. And so there is another way, and we do have free will, but it is from a higher faculty of choice. And yes, if you don't believe in the higher faculty and you don't call on that power, then you're stuck in running the carbon-based memory, which appears to be just fate, that you just, you know, it's just what happens to you. So anyway, I'm going to welcome Michael now, and we'll continue the conversation.
Thank you, dear heart. And I didn't hear everything you said about the latest video that you found on his work, but I watched it, and there's one really important distinction that doesn't show up in the video, and that is the guy just talks about, if it's the same one, sweetie, that you looked at, the guy just talks about, you know, there's a resort that threw away some bad food, and, you know, that it was the alpha males, the angry, nasty ones that died. But actually the food wasn't just, you know, old, bad food. It was tainted with tuberculosis, to which baboons are susceptible. And the baboons that didn't live in the angry, aggressive, you know, I'm going to tear your eyes out world, didn't succumb to the tuberculosis. Those with the added stress of their hostility, and I mean, I don't know about baboons, but my assumption would be that the reason why the baboon is so angry when there are others who aren't is they're living in fear. There's the, you know, the load that goes along with it. So anyway, I thought that was an important little piece to add to the puzzle. And so let's start out and open the gate with a question. If anyone has anything to bring up from yesterday's session. Any thoughts, questions, anything to reinforce, disagree with, agree with?
There are some hands up, but I think they're left over from Dr. Tim. So if you press 1 on your phone again, your hand will go down. And then if you press 1 again, then it'll come back up again, and I'll know that you're wanting to talk during this second hour. none of them changed, so I'm assuming there are no hands up for you.
All right, sweet. Well, the stage we're looking at in the article, now he's using an example. He's trying to prove that no such thing as free will exists. So he gives, we kind of tailed off with this yesterday, imagine a group of friends go to a story, a movie about an inspiring activist. One applies the next day to join the Peace Corps. One is stuck with the beautiful cinematography and signs up for the filming course. The rest are annoyed they didn't see a Marvel film. And, you know, one of the workshops that we do is called Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment. And the theme of that workshop is kind of that your purpose for life, for anything, is the rudder that steers you. And so as opposed to this being something, this being proof of and voiding free will, actually this particular idea that he brings forward, this metaphor for his thesis that there's no free will, is actually, to me, proof that what we need to know is who we are and what our purpose is. Because the purpose I have for a particular situation will determine what the output of my mind is. And remember that perception, basically living in the world or talking about, my take, the world of perception and doesn't go beyond it. Perception is a construct of the mind driven by goals. So let's use another example, a separate example, and then we'll go back to this one. I think it'll make my point make more sense. Let's imagine that you've got a friend that you really cherish and just, you know, really honor, and you're getting ready to do a trip to the Bahamas, and you invite them to come on the trip to the Bahamas because you want to honor them and thank them for the role they played in your life. So you're there in the Bahamas enjoying the scenery, the water, everything, and your friend, cancel the thought, gets caught in a riptide and drowns. You had a purpose, you had a goal involved with this friend, and obviously there's going to be something other than celebration go on for you when that event happens. But let's imagine you had a different goal. Let's imagine you had a friend and you wanted to steal his business. And you'd set up everything, insurance and all those things were all set up. All he has to do is die and you become the inheritor of his business. And you bring him on a trip to the Bahamas, and when he gets caught in the riptide, what's your mind output? Same exact mind, nothing different. Same exact mind. What is the mind output? It outputs delight and glee and joy and, I made it. Or maybe guilt and fear and will I get caught? But it's a totally different process in terms of the direction that your mind is taking things. Or was it Ella Wheeler Wilcox that we shared her poem back a couple of weeks ago? One ship sails east, the other west, on the self-same winds that blow. 'Tis the set of the sails and not the gales that determine the way she goes. So the rudder for life is knowing our purpose and coming into alignment with that purpose. And our goals, if we're conscious, are always set on purpose. And there's where we influence, where, you know, what he's talking about in this article is, well, you know, these are all just influences and the influences run the show. Well, no, if I know who I am, if I know that I am love, if I know my purpose, and I have a goal to achieve a particular result, then I become the influencer of all of the things that this thesis is saying, you know, the predeterminate mind thesis runs the show. So we're looking at what the real purpose of the human mind is, and it's to give us all of the data that he's talking about. But again, if we are only functioning as physiology, as carbon-based memory, and as the mind, the brain being an instrument of the mind, if that's all we're functioning as, it's true. Those influences run the show. But when we wake up to who we are, it's a different game. So he gives this idea of, one person goes to the Peace Corps, one sees the cinematography, goes to filmmaking, and the other wanted to see a Marvel film. So he goes on to say all of the friends were primed to respond as they did when they sat down to watch. Maybe one had heightened adrenaline from the close call with another car on the drive over. Maybe another was in a new relationship and awash with oxytocin, the so-called love hormone. They had different levels of dopamine and serotonin in their brains, different cultural backgrounds, different sensitives to sensory distractions in the theater. None chose how the stimulus of the film would affect them any more than the sea slug, and he used an example, remember, of a sea slug getting away from an electric shock. So he's right. All of those influences, if we're only working out a carbon-based memory and have never awakened beyond that, run the show. There is no choice. Predeterminism is the game. Again, if you know every piece of data in a system, you can predict what any stimulus will produce as a result within that system. But that doesn't account for the gift that we were given of the ability to choose. And if we never activate choice, if we never go beyond carbon-based memory, then I agree with him 100%. But the fact is, when we discover that we ourselves are conscious, active, present love, and we can function out of that conscious, active, present love, that's where our higher faculties exist. And it can be tricky because this non-being mind, generations and generations and generations have pre-programmed the non-being mind. And when I talk about the non-being mind, I'm talking about a mind that works strictly and purely by resonance. And it's just because someone has what we call a human body doesn't mean they have a human life. If you go into the experience that we've shared with you before, go back to the moment where you held a newborn child. Tap into the essence of that newborn child. Now, this is a question Jeanie and I have asked of tens of thousands of people all over the globe, and virtually 100% of the time, the answer is always some variation of the theme of love. So again, go back and imagine holding that newborn and answer the question, is the newborn loving you or is the newborn love? It's pretty clear that the newborn is. Human life, I would offer, is the conscious active presence of love. Without it, we don't have a human life. And sadly enough, this world that he's talking about of predeterminism, basically that's another word for it, this world has a specialty when a child comes in, and that is to knock the experience of themselves as love out of their lives, and then along about the age of 17, 18, 19, 20, send them out into the world to find somebody to love them. And now we've substituted a whole fraud approval for human life. Notice if you watch the video on stress, the big stressor is that these creatures, whether they're the baboons or the humans, are not getting approval, or not fulfilling their goals, or not achieving what they want to achieve to experience themselves as worthy. Whereas human life, when you experience who you are as a human being, worthiness is just part of the package. The rest of it just disappears. But our culture has specialized in knocking the human life out of us. And if we're in a pursuit of finding a love relationship, how did that song go? Why don't you find somebody to love? You better find somebody. What's the game? It's approval. It's not love. It's all stimulus response, as he's saying. But when conscious, active, present love comes into the experience, then we have a whole set of faculties that are added. And those faculties are 1, choice, 2, will, 3, imagination, 4, intuition, and 5, the faculty or the ability to achieve true perception rather than perception fueled from the past. Now, it's subtle because in each case there is a cheap copy. Over time, the experience of these faculties, the carbon-based memory system, the memory bank, has kind of made a copy up. So instead of choice, as we've talked about earlier, there's decision. You know, again, if I say, don't think about the color of your car, what resonates in brain cells? Put the color of your car. There's no choice about that. And even the person says, well, I'm not thinking about it. It's like, well, what is it you're not thinking about? In order not to think about it, you had to have those brain cells move. That's a pure resonance response. There's no choice about that. It's a decision. It's just pure resonance. But we have the ability to select between stimulus. No other creature has that ability that we know of on the planet. We have the ability to select, to make choices, to influence the mind and plant in it something different than it's ever seen before. Will, the second faculty that I spoke of, will is the subtle faculty of our human beingness that allows us, or through which, I should say to be more correct, through which we manage our minds. And the mind is managed by indirection. You can't manage the mind directly. Anybody who's ever said, I'm going to quit smoking, knows that you don't manage the mind directly because, well, I know people who've said that 100 times and they quit 100 times, but they never quit smoking. Why? Because forcing yourself, here's now will trying to step in, the cheap copy of willpower. I'm going to do this. I'm going to force this to happen. Where will is the ability to manage your own mind. Well, how do you manage your mind? Well, we actually have a worksheet for that. It's called the Mind Goal Management Sheet. You can find it on the website. And what do I mean when I say the mind is managed through indirection? Well, we're now in an age of technology where we have voice controls, but let's go back just a few years where there were no voice controls. And let's imagine that I'm finding it very warm here in my room, and I decide that I want the air conditioner to come on. Do I just say, air conditioner, come on? I can say, air conditioner, come on until the cows come home. The air conditioner's not going to come on. What do I have to do? I have to go over to the thermostat and turn the temperature down. Then the air conditioner. So that's indirection. I indirectly influence the air conditioner by changing the thermostat. Well, the human mind is managed in exactly the same way. And most people don't know this. The human mind is managed by goals. Now, we have pre-programmed in carbon-based memory 1,000 generational goals, 1,000,000 goals probably, or millions of goals. And circumstances resonate the goal that's there from maybe 2 or 10 generations ago, and bingo, that goal takes over, and gee, it seems like the whole thing is just run by the automatic decision system. But not if I know that the reason I'm experiencing this, let's say, traumatic output of my own mind, this painful traumatic event, is because I loaded a goal in my mind that resonates that pain and trauma in me. If I know how to manage my mind, I recognize that this perceptual construct of my mind that's so painful for me is a product of a goal. I can cancel that goal, and when I do, then that pained perceptual construct will collapse on itself, and when it collapses on itself, I get to access the underlying inclination that would like to run the show. And when I bring it forward in the presence of active love, anything that's not in alignment with love is just blown away. Transmutation of energy. It's instantly transmuted. It's instantly changed. So that's what happens when I know how to run my mind. And that's an act of will. It's a spiritual faculty. Without it, he's right with this. Predetermination runs the whole show. And the cheap copy of that ability to be conscious enough to know that the way that stress is created is by setting a goal, and the way that stress is alleviated is by canceling a goal, then I can collapse any inclination that comes from past generations, that comes out of carbon-based memory, and clean it up. And then I make a space for me to step in as a human being and direct the show. Now, many inclinations, especially the ones that are linked to pain, have been going on for generations and generations and generations and generations. Look at that story of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. Do you think that was really a story about people being lost in a hot, sandy place that was 35 square miles? Do you think that was what it was about? They were lost there for 40 years? You think they didn't know enough about astronomy to get up in the morning and know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and follow it, the sun, and be out of the desert within a couple of days at most? Do you think they were that stupid? No, it wasn't about being lost in a 35 square mile area. It was a story about the unconscious. That word desert is a code word for the unconscious. So yeah, most people spend about their first 40 or so years in the desert, functioning unconsciously, with no idea which end is up. They're being run, as he's speaking about, by all of those influences in carbon-based memory. And what did they say had to happen to get out of the desert? The old generation had to die off. Now, that doesn't mean everybody in old physical bodies has to physically die. The root of the word generation is genere. It means cause. All of the causes held in the mind from the past, all of the inclinations that would like to run the show, if we were to give them the capacity to like, all of those energetic impetus will tend to run things until we wake up. Take a hold of them and get rid of them. And the process of getting rid of those inclinations from the past that run the mind is called forgiveness. Again, nothing to do with, I'm going to let you off the hook for what's happening inside of me, but it comes from a space of recognizing, oh, I have an untoward influence in my mind. I have this inclination that's firing in me that I recognize as corrupt data, and I choose to remove the corrupt data. And when I remove the corrupt data, I'm freed of that influence. You know, how many of you ever said, oh, I'm never going to do that again? But they didn't have any clue. You know, we all heard about the alcoholic, and, you know, he had a drunken night and did some terrible things, and next morning to his wife saw him, I'm so sorry, honey, I'm so sorry, I will never do that. And he means he'll never do that again. But if he never goes in and cleans up his carbon-based memory system, the next time he's got that much alcohol in his system and that stimulus, whatever it was, occurs, if he's never removed that behavior, he's going to do that behavior again. It's just, you know, as simple as night follows day. That's called living in the desert. What was the alternative? The promised land. It wasn't about a place with, you know, palm trees and dates and, you know, beautiful women. That wasn't what the desert or the promised land was about. The promised land is, rather than being without free will and able to determine where your life goes, you have the ability to source something never seen in the inclination-driven machine called the body-mind unit. Cheap copy of will, the ability to manage your own mind through managing your goals. And there are several things that are required to do that. That's a whole other workshop. Getting the stress you need is where we talk about that, and laws of living. But the cheap copy is willpower. I'm going to force this. I'll make this happen. The third faculty is imagination. Literally the ability to image into the world something new. It's interesting, they've done research with kids, and before they get to school age, before they're shuffled off to a place where they're now going to be brainwashed by a system that requires them to fall into commercial servanthood, their imaginations are awesome. But after a year or so in most schools, their imaginations are gone. And one of the things I just cherish deeply about Ari Rain, our granddaughter, who's now 5, and she started school, is her imagination. And I mean, we talk to her about her imagination and her ability to do that, to tap into that other realm and bring energies in that aren't already stored in carbon-based memory. And we acknowledge that in her, and we tell her to make sure, to understand that there'll be forces that will want to shut that down in you. And you can just breathe through and let go of those forces. You can forgive any influence they have on you and make sure that you keep this cherished faculty of imagination alive in you through your educational process. And so that's literally the faculty with which we bring other energetic patterns into the system that aren't already there. The non-being mind's cheap copy of imagination is fantasy. I get to hear people doing fantasies all the time around this work, people who come to work saying, oh, Michael, this is so great. Boy, I'm going to do this. Boy, I'm going to teach it. I'm going to travel. I'm going to have a center, and I'm going to do forgiveness. And 6 weeks later, they're still living in their fantasy. And, well, how many worksheets have you done? How many of you actually put the pen to the paper and done? Oh, I'm going to have a center. Yeah, good luck. If it's your imagination instructing you to do that, and you have the other faculties activated, then you're going to fulfill what you have brought into your structure. If it's just a fantasy produced by the mind, then, it dissipates and disappears pretty quickly. The next faculty is intuition. So imagination is the ability to bring in something new that's never been seen. Intuition is the ability to live directly in the actuality of the world rather than live in the world of perception. So the mind, carbon-based memory, that my take in this article where he's saying there's no free will, is he's talking about people who live in that, and that's where most people live. The Harvard research that describes the way the perceptual mind works in Harvard, they came up with this research. We talked about it in an earlier show, but just to repeat it because it fits perfectly here and fulfills a different point, is that in a time frame where they can measure 10,000 units of electrical activity in the brain, it's about a 25th of a second, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. So in this work, we refer to that metaphorically as the 9-bit mind, and I don't mean it's an absolute literal 9 bits. Actually, the lab stats were 7 plus or minus 2, so as little as 5 bits of data go into conscious awareness, as much as 9 in that particular time frame. So if you think about 10,000 brain cells firing and your perception is reduced to 9 bits, that's a pretty tiny fragment of what's available inside of you. Now, in that same time frame, it's been estimated that the actuality of the world, so we've got reality, actuality. 6 people are at an accident, they all go to court, and you listen to them testify about the accident, and you wonder if any 2 of them were at the same accident. Their realities are so different. Each one experiences that accident through their own perceptual constructs, and so they have a view of it. The actuality itself, what those 6 people stood around and observed that triggered in each of them 9 bits of data that were so different. Again, you wonder if they were at the same accident. It's been estimated in that time frame that actuality perhaps has as much as 2 trillion bits of data. And then if you look at what this new Webb telescope is showing us, perhaps it's 200 trillion bits of data. My take is that the mind will never comprehend that. Carbon-based memory, the thing that we're talking about that has no will, it's just a free flow of information in it, that will never comprehend. However, that will never even, another thought, will never even be able to speak about the actuality. About it, maybe around the edges of it, but that's going to be it. But in being, I believe that we as human beings are designed, when we awaken to who we are and function out of being where these faculties exist, are designed to comprehend and bring into this world those things which have not yet been thought of. We're here to comprehend the actuality of this thing that the Webb new Webb telescope showing us, the universe is, I forget, within multiple millions of times greater than what they thought before the telescope went out into space. I think we as human beings are designed to function in that and comprehend that. But the comprehension will not come through the mind or from the mind. The secrets are not hidden in the mind, they are hidden by the mind. That's why forgiveness is about collapsing and getting the mind out of the way. And then, when we function as fully conscious beings, with all of our faculties practiced, skilled at them, then we're going to live in a space that is so far beyond what we're doing right now, so far beyond what we could even start to comprehend with our carbon-based memory minds. And intuition is the faculty that will give us access to that. The ego's cheap copy of intuition is being a psychic. You remember in many circles they warned about psychics. Why do they warn about psychics? Because the psychic is, well, there's an influence going on in the world. It resonates something in the carbon-based memory of the psychic, and the psychic reads what it resonates in them. The psychic that's had a horrible divorce has somebody come to them who has a relationship conflict, and what do? They read through their own stuff, so to speak. Oh, you're going to have this horrible divorce, and it's going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. And if this person walks away receiving that as an influence from an authority, this psychic is supposed to be so good, then watch them instead of resolving what could have been a simple, perhaps, resolution in that relationship. They'll just go on and create more trauma and drama within the relationship. So the intuition is the faculty with which we can access the actuality of the moment rather than just realities. The psychic is playing in the realities within their own minds. And then the final, and Jeanie tells me you've got a caller, but I'll just touch on one more, the fifth faculty that we'll talk about, and that is that, so we've got perception. There's a lesson in the on our YouTube channel. If you just go to WHYagain.org, our website, and you'll see the social media links. Click on YouTube, and then go to a lesson, ACIM, What is the World? And that lesson from the Course in Miracles is very powerful, and it opens up with, the world is false perception. It is born of error. It has not left its source. Everything that you experience based in hostility and fear is a result of generational patterns of corrupt data, and perception will guide you to do those things. Not because it's right or good or useful, but because that's what's in there. And in there, accompanying that, is the good old family feeling. How many times have you heard somebody say, oh, I swore I'd never be like my mother, father. And then when the stress was up and the chips are down, not understanding the power person dynamic, they did the very thing that their power person did to them that they hated most. Because that's what carbon-based memory does. That's all it's capable of. That's all perception can do, is feed you what's in there. And once the power person dynamic is established in a mind, it will run that person's life until that power person dynamic is understood, uncovered, and forgiven, removed from the structure. So perception is fueled from carbon-based memory. It's a construct of the past. And in the ancient teachings, they called it the mind of man. You might remember a passage where Yeshua comes out of the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's Peter, the hero, who has the sword that's going to save him. And Yeshua addresses Peter directly. Excuse me, Peter, for this analogy, but that's the name in the book. So he addresses Peter, and he says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And then he tells us what his Aramaic language means by the word Satan. He says, for you think in the mind of man rather than the plan of God. The mind of man, carbon-based memory, can't access actuality. The mind of man, carbon-based memory, is stuck in its patterns from the generations, living in the desert. What was the alternative? The promised land, conscious co-creation. That we can comprehend the actuality, which in that case metaphorically is referred to as the plan of God. This is the creation. We have the ability, if we can let go of the reducing valve. You know, the human mind is nothing but a reducing valve. If you've got a 200 quadrillion bit world and you get it down to 9 bits of data, you've got a reducing valve. You know, a fly's mind is a reducing valve. You know, it comes in the room and doesn't see the fan and the TV and the art over there. The fly comes in the room and it looks for infrared energy and goes for the heat and blood, goes for something to eat, a mosquito, what have you. Their mind is a reducing valve that gives them only what's useful for survival. It sees nothing of actuality. I offer, as human beings, as non-humans, are still living in a world that is irrelevant to actuality. We're no different, and I'm in agreement with him with this article. We're no different than the flea or the fly or anything else. Our mind generates a construct that's useful for survival at the moment, but it's not useful for living as the created essence that we are and bringing into the world what comes next. It's interesting if you hear that the passage in the creation story that says, you know, and the Creator breathed into Adamos the breath of life, and Nafsha, this created spiritual being, became an incarnated being, incarnated into carbon-based memory. And then he's told to go and reproduce and replenish the face of the earth. Most everybody listened to the reproduce instruction and had no clue what it meant to replenish. And in Aramaic, that word means bring to completion, finish the creation. Use your originative faculties to bring into the world what you are uniquely here for. And the game of kings is to make sure you never do that. The king wants your energy to be used to produce the results he wants. He wants you to be a good commercial servant. And so, to hell with your faculties. In fact, I'm going to make sure you never understand that you have any higher faculties, and then you will be a good slave to the king. But my offering is that's not what we're designed for. We were designed, rather than looking down, you know, it's interesting, and you hear the fear-based mind's interpretation of the scriptures, and you see people walking around with this, repent, for the day of judgment is at hand. Of course, the guy that's going to judge is the one who, when he was here, said, I didn't come to judge. But they've got it all made up that he will judge someday. That's his new job. That's the fear-based mind. The word, and it's true, you need to repent. And the word repent, pense means to think. It literally means that you need to turn your mind in another direction. You know, imagine that the being is right there above this human form, what we call a body-mind unit, with the mind right there at the top of the head. And the being is looking into the screen of perception, 9 bits of data, and it's hypnotized, it's locked, it's lost in there. Carbon-based memory is running the show. The solution is to repent. Literally, to turn our thinking, our minds in another direction. There is quite literally another mind available to us. It was called the mind of Christ, which literally is the mind of love. And with that mind, we introduce into the carbon-based world something that's never been seen before. We replenish the face of the earth. So that would be the difference between perception, that the mind is fueled from and is nothing but a reflection of carbon-based memory, and true perception, that the constructs of the mind are fueled from the state of actuality, from the state of being, rather than from the past, carbon-based memory. So I hope all that came together and made sense. And Miss Jeanie, you've got a hand up, so let's say hello to our caller.
We actually have 2 hands up. The first one, though,
awesome.
is Terry, area code 336. You're on the air.
Hey there, good sir.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, we're rocking. Having fun.
All right. I was enjoying your comments there, and also I heard you got another call. My call was I woke up this morning thinking about the movie Inception, and
Right.
when it came out, we were out in Heartland, and it, you really flashed onto that, and I just wanted to hear your rendition of how that related to the work at some point. If you've got something else going on, I understand it. That was what was pressing on my mind.
Well, for me, what the movie Inception did, and we haven't watched it for a while, maybe that's another one we need to pick up and watch again, because it's really powerful to show how all these interacting levels can be so complex. Actually, in a sense, if you look at just the influences, it really reinforces Sapolsky's idea of all of these influences. But then when you bring conscious awareness in, you got a whole different game. But I think, to me, Inception was just a beautiful example of how energetic patterns tend to run the show. And, of course, when you have forgiveness, you can weaken the energetic patterns that run your show to look like your generations looked and change the game and take life in a whole different direction. That would be my take on it in the short form.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, okay, thank you. And as you were talking about that, it kind of rattled some cells in my brain there. Where not only that, but it's also like it was an example to me of the file folder effect and the cascading opening of the files and deeper, and how that once the thought gets planted into my mind, there's going to be a little bit of extra work on some more than others. Some that are deeper, then I'm going to have to go deeper and do a little bit more work.
Yes.
To delete that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, my take is that's a place, that's kind of the juxtaposition where knowing your purpose is really important. Because when you know your purpose, like really truly are tapped into who you are as a human being and know your purpose, there will be things from the generational mind, carbon-based memory, that will come up and they'll look very attractive and maybe be things you like to do. And what I found when I really got crisp and clear on purpose was there are things that in the past my carbon-based memory would have inclined me to do. I like to do them and I go do them. But when I now use the standard of my purpose and those things come up and they don't align, they don't serve my purpose, then I just don't do them. And then other things that in the past I would have rejected, I don't like to do, I don't want to do it, but when I recognize that it's in alignment with my purpose, I do it anyway because that's how I align. As an energy system, we bring through more energy and aliveness, not by efforting and struggling, but by aligning. So when I align with my actual purpose, I'm maybe going to do things that I'd rather not do, that I don't even like to do, but because they're part of achieving my purpose, I do them anyway. And that's all part of the energy system and the waking up and the importance of being cognizant of your real purpose rather than being cognizant of what the culture does to virtually everybody, and that is brainwashes them to the king's purpose. Does that fit? Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Delighted. What else be on your mind, sir?
Well, I went through this deep layer of grief that came up yesterday, and just breathed through it. It wasn't even figuring it out, but I kind of attribute it to our breath session and getting in there. And
your still point session Saturday, yeah. That was powerful.
Yeah, clearing that energy out. And then I was up early this morning and was looking around, and I came across that article that I sent to you. It's kind of long. It took a while, but I hung in there with it because I found it to be fascinating about this whole physics and all this kind of stuff. Whenever you get a chance to, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I will. I haven't read the article yet. I read the short, the one paragraph or a couple of paragraphs you sent me, and it ties right in with, I mean, we're now moving out of the world of what we've called physics into quantum, into subtle energy influences. And when the ancient teachings say the mind of man, carbon-based memory, has not conceived of what lies in store, I think that's what they're talking about. And we're designed to be able to conceive of that, but we have to get out of. We have to be out of our minds. That's the game. You got to be out of your mind.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. It's a long read, and one of the things he introduced was that with the physicists and the discussion about this and that and all, that they haven't taken into consideration gravity. He threw gravity in there, and how gravity figured into that whole equation, and in the aspect of time jumping, and that all sounds real sci-fi and all that, but he put it in a very scientific way about the way that you would shift around these different pieces of reality, and that's as a human structure, we have all that fantastic stuff going on, but our minds aren't capable of grasping all that, but we're part of that. It was just very empowering.
And being, to me, when we look at it, we think about it from that point of view, this body-mind unit is just an instrument for expression in the world, for being.
Yeah.
And it's limited, like the fly, the leopard, each creature has its own perceptual constructs that contribute to its survival. My take is there comes a point where we can, now that we can observe the whole thing, we can see that there is a power behind it all that's busy building instruments of expression of what lies unexpressed. And we're on that continuum. And, if we were to, my take would be if we were to look at the continuum being from 1 to 100, the fly or the mosquito is maybe at a 1, and we're maybe at a 6 on a scale of 100 as to what we ultimately are designed to be able to comprehend, express, and work within. And when we choose to cooperate with cleaning up our multi-generational database we call a body-mind unit, cleaning up our genetics, taking on the genetic patterns of the past that limit our understanding and our expression, then we get to consciously cooperate with building an instrument for the full expression of what's possible. Let's say I love Mozart, and I've got my $10 transistor radio tuned to Mozart, and I'm listening to Mozart. Well, that's one instrument to listen to Mozart through, but imagine I've got a $100,000 stereo system and tuner, and I listen to Mozart. Now I'm really listening to Mozart, a whole different game, the instrument it's coming through. And to me, our conscious cooperation with upgrading this multi-generational database called the body-mind unit, this instrument, gives us more full expression and possibility. Consciously cooperating with understanding who we are and where we're going, what's possible. And to me, that's kind of like, that old song, What's It All About, Alfie? That's what it's all about.
What it's all about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the key things to the full function of the instrument is you got to get rid of all the corrupt data in it. And that means everything based in hostility or fear has to go, because those corrupt data, pockets of information, destroy the instrument and the ability for the instrument to achieve full expression. So this is just this instrument is just a mode of expression, and as we choose to upgrade it, our whole experience is upgraded. That's what the work is about to me.
Yeah.
The ancient teachings of the mind of man is not yet conceived of what lies in store. We're designed to be able to conceive of it, but not while we're stuck in the 9-bit mind. Excuse me, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. And then we get to go sit in the front row of an actual orchestra, like one of the renowned orchestras of the world, and have that experience.
Exactly. Next level. Yep. And we're designed as beings to go to that live experience, not experience it through an instrument. That's why you hear me over and over saying, in order to heal, you've got to be out of your mind. It's an instrument.
Yep.
Breathing with you. Glad you had that opening. That's awesome. I love the community that's developing around this still point. Yeah, it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The level of awareness of each person in it and the space it's held is just, I think, just developing beautifully. Pretty cool. Well, any other thoughts for you, sir?
I'm good, Chief. I appreciate it.
Hey, all right. Appreciate you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Have a blessed one. All righty. Bye-bye. It's
Our
really
next
pretty
caller.
awesome. It's really pretty awesome to connect with so many unique individuals that are doing their work, that are moving the needle in the direction of full conscious awareness. It's an amazing privilege. So go for it, sweetie.
All right, this is Peter, 619. You're on the air.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, hello, Doctor. I'm glad I heard the other gentleman speak.
I'll tell you what. There's something wrong with your connection, Peter. Maybe you could hang up and dial back in. All I hear is static.
Oh, okay.
We'll hold for a second if you want to just dial back in again. I don't know if you can hear us, but I can hear your voice behind all this static and can't make out your words.
He hung up, so I'm waiting for him to call back in.
I'll give it a second. So while we're waiting for Peter to dial back in, sweetie, any thoughts for you on all of this, especially with the writing you're doing with your new book? Anything
No, not at the moment.
Bring into that? No? Okay.
Okay, and he's just dialed back in, so I'm going to turn his microphone back on. Let's see if that's better.
Hello?
Are you there, Peter?
You're clear. Got you, Peter. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I was just saying that I enjoyed listening to the other gentleman who went through the weekend experience because, as you know, I signed up for it. And now, I don't know if this is normal, but I'm so excited to get back into the groove of doing this, but now I'm actually half petrified of what I'm going to discover.
Great.
So I guess that's
the reality.
Awesome.
You have good reason to be. You have good reason to be,
yep.
Sir. All of us do. Nobody's in a different boat than that one.
Yep.
But
so it's becoming more real every day. Connecting with the other gentleman on the phone, it's just really a good process for me, more people. So I did want to say something about perception because I loved your stories about it. One of the Air Force training things that the Air Force used to do, you'd fill a room with students, half pilots, half engineers, and you just go to one half of the group, a mixture of pilots and engineers. Go out in the hallway. We're going to show you a video of an aircraft accident. Then the other people come in from the hallway and ask questions. The bottom line was the people that asked questions didn't know what to ask, and the people that said what they saw was completely different from everybody else in the room. So accident investigations with aviation take months because and that's why we have voice recorders, black boxes, because people don't know what they see. We learn that.
That's right.
We learn that
Everybody has a construct. Everybody has a reality all the time.
Yep.
There are a couple of quotes that fit in here, and one I'll share that I often share on the show. And there's a gentleman, and this one was not written for you and I, Peter, It was actually written back in the 1700s, late 1600s, early 1700s. And a gentleman named Francois Fenelon talks about what happens when you start to delve in to the mind. This is 300 years ago. There was this level of understanding, and what he says is, as the light increases, we see ourselves to be worse than we thought. We're amazed at our former blindness as we see issuing forth from the depths of our heart a whole swarm of shameful feelings like filthy reptiles crawling from a hidden cave. We never could have believed that we had harbored such things, and we stand aghast as we watch them gradually appear. But while our faults diminish, the light by which we see them waxes brighter, and we're filled with horror. Bear in mind for your comfort that we only perceive our malady when the cure begins. So it is a step in the process that, all we have to do is look at our history and recognize that literally this multi-generational database has every thought, every feeling, every reality, every unresolved issue, as well as every blessing of every generation in our bloodline. And you just look at the history of the world and you look at some of the crap that's gone down, some of the trauma, the just pure, literally, so-called human beings functioning out of mental illness. And we've all got that in our history. And that's ultimately what needs to be faced.
It's making sense. And then now with the internet and social media, I guess it's even getting worse.
Well, more is coming out into view for sure.
Well, thank you.
Delighted. So here, and to reinforce your input about that experiment you were talking about in the flight training schools, here's a quote. The CIA put out a book. We've actually got a link to it on our website, or a copy of it on our website. You can download it. I don't know how many millions they spent, but there's one chapter. It's basically a book about human intelligence, and there's one chapter in the book where they're looking at perception. So after the millions of dollars spent, here's the bottom line conclusion from the CIA. People tend to think of perception as a passive process. We see, hear, smell, taste, and feel stimuli that impinge upon our senses. We think if we're at all objective, we record what is actually there. Yet perception is demonstrably an active rather than passive process, rather than records reality. Perception implies understanding as well as awareness. It is a process of inference in which people construct their own version of reality on the basis of information stimulated by what is provided through the five senses. And, everybody's got a reality all the time. Realities based in hostility and fear are corrupt data and need to be cleaned up. And, how many generations has it been going on? So, well, I don't know about you, Peter, but I can't think of anybody in my bloodline, uncles, aunts, or people that I knew, neighbors, friends, acquaintances, as a kid through my early life. I can't think of anybody that could have started to have this conversation that we're having here today. I don't know about you, but if you haven't got some of your bloodline that could have sat down and had that conversation, I find it very precious to be able to have these kinds of conversations with my granddaughter, who's 5, who one day when we were watching a video, she's into anatomy and physiology. We were watching a video on the mind, and in this particular video, they talked about how the mind or a person. It was actually a cartoon kids thing on physiology, and all of the organs in the body in a cartoon form come out, and each of them in turn sings what their part is, and the eyes, it's their turn to sing, and the voice track goes, I am your eyes, I am your eyes, I see the world around you. Our granddaughter, who was 4 at the time, said, Papa, they don't understand. We don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. It's like at 4, she knows it. If we can't think of anybody that has had that comprehension in our history, then being the early adopter means there's some pretty heavy-duty work to do. And that's just, part of the process if we're going to open that gate. So thanks for joining us and opening the gate and rocking on.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, my friend. Blessings. Take care. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye.